Welcome. Today I'll be talking about what settings I use currently for OBS and Handbrake. If you don't know what Handbrake is, it's a video transcoding software. Make shit smaller or make them compatible for other devices. Alright, so here's OBS. I'm using OBS Studio version 0.16.2, 64-bit. Alright, so this is my main gaming computer. I'm capturing it through my secondary computer that I use for my primary capturing purposes. Occasionally I might record a video from the main one. If I do that, I don't really stream, so I'm not really going to cover my streaming settings. Even though I'm well aware that OBS is primarily a streaming software, but I use it for recording. Alright, so key thing here, recording format. Always record in FLV. MP4 is corruptible. If you record an MP4 and anything happens during the recording or during saving the recording or anything, that video file is unusable. It may be recovered using other software, but typically it's crap. So I record in FLV, Flash video format. The benefit of Flash video is something to do with the header or footer information, to where if the computer crashes or something happens and the file zorks out, seeking through the video, like skipping ahead or skipping back in the video, might be funky at first, but the video is still playable. It works. One of the downsides of Flash video, though, is you can only really record audio for one channel. So that's typically like gameplay, microphone. You'll mix all that shit together, and that'll be one channel, one audio channel. It mixes them all together. If you want to record multiple layers in your video file, another format that you can use is MKV. It's pretty much a similar thing. These are just format containers, right? There's benefits to each one. There's downsides to each one. Typically, Flash video is actually an older container, so it's very funny. Yeah, so I record in FLV. I don't have any use for multi-track audio, so I don't use MKV. But if I wanted to do multiple tracks, like maybe if you edit a lot, you could record your gameplay on one track and you can record your commentary on another. And then while you're editing, you can dick around with the levels while you're editing, raise, lower, mute, whatever. I actually probably should be doing that, just because sometimes I have a problem on YouTube and I actually just go in and just mute whole sections of audio for 30 seconds. Whereas if I recorded on separate tracks, I could just go in and mute the game audio and not the commentary audio. But I don't like to edit. In fact, I hate editing. So this is the format I record into. A big problem, though, is some editing software does not accept FLV, but in OBS Studio, there is an easy option to remux recordings, so you can convert your FLV or MKV. I'm not sure if MKV does this. I don't know, it should be fine. You're going to edit anyway. Who gives a shit? But FLV can be easily muxed almost instantly into MP4 for compatibility with video editors. So if you edit a lot and your video editing software doesn't support FLV, that's one thing you can do. But anyway, back to what I was talking about. So I use 2 different bit rates, one for streaming, one for recording. I like my recordings to have the highest bit rate available to them currently. I used to record directly to a lossy format. Well, FLV is lossy. Well, actually, X264 is the encoder. FLV is just the container. You could record lossless with Flash video container. But, all right, I'm getting off track here. Anyway, yeah. So I like to just give as much bitrate allowance as I can. So when I record, I use 320-bit X264. I have other encoders available, hardware video encoder through my graphics card, but I find that X264, even though there's a lot more load on the system, I find it a lot more reliable. And I think the picture looks better too, which should be the case because video encoders, well, hardware video encoders, they're designed more for speed, not for quality. So, yeah. But what I found is I get more lag in my videos using a hardware encoder as compared to a software encoder, which is X264. I don't use any custom muxer settings because the number one thing I learned with video crap is if you don't know what you're doing, forget about it. So, I don't understand any of that crap. I used to use custom settings, but sometimes shit changes between different software versions, different updates, and so sometimes something might screw up, and then it's easier to troubleshoot shit. So, go for the simplest path. And that's using nothing. Rate control, there's different options. I use constant rate factor. The benefit of this is that if I leave the video going, it's not going to take up a shitload of space. Whereas if you use something like constant bitrate or average bitrate or variable bitrate, typically there's a range of bitrate that each frame will have. But with constant rate factor, this screen that you're looking at right now, X264 works by changes in frames. So if nothing changes from frame to frame, there's not a whole lot of data moving forward. So you can get smaller video files by not having a crap load of movement if you have constant rate factor. Now, if I were using constant bitrate right now, it would be using a crap load of hard drive space. Now, that's good for streaming because of a whole bunch of issues. But pretty much with constant bitrate, like let's say you set the bitrate at 6,000. Every single frame will be 6,000 bitrate. So that's a lot of space. With constant rate factor, even a low constant rate factor that I have here, I typically make larger files, but they're not as large as they would be with constant bitrate. Well, actually, some are higher, some are lower, but if there's not a lot of movement in the scene, you're going to get lower bit rates on those frames. And I use 15 constant rate factor because I've been re-encoding or transcoding, whatever, my larger video files down with a software utility called Handbrake recently. I used to record directly to constant rate factor of 20, maybe 19 or 18, and then just upload that raw file to YouTube. But what I found is by doing this method, I can have much better looking files. And by having a encoder that's not encoding in real time, you get more efficiency in encoding those frames down. So you get much smaller files. And I archive all my footage. So the less I have to archive, the better. And of course, moving ahead, keyframe interval, I use 4. Pretty much all streaming software or all streaming services like 2. But 4 is a multiple of 2, and I found that YouTube itself is very tolerant of 4, and I get minusculely smaller files going with 4 as opposed to 2. So pretty much this is the keyframe interval. So every 4 seconds, the encoder will make a keyframe. Now, keyframes, to my understanding, are basically just frames that don't have an encoding pass over that frame. So they're not touched. They just move ahead. So there's benefits to that, like scrubbing through timelines or whatever in video editing software. The keyframes will show up more or something. I don't know. I don't understand it, but I understand enough to where 4 works all right. I could probably lower it to 2 now. I don't know. I've had it at 4 for a while. Anyway, and I use ultra fast for the CPU usage preset on this computer. I used to use very fast, but then I found that CPU load on my system is too high for most games using very fast with 1080p 60. So I pretty much just go ultra fast, and to hell with the file size. I'll just put it down later. And profile high. If you're streaming, I found that main is typically the way to go. Baseline is more for mobile devices. So if that's the kind of content that you put out to where you want most people to be looking at it from a mobile device, baseline is typically the way to go. But main is what a lot of streaming software or streaming services want you to use. I go with high just because there's different things allowed using the high profile with X264 as the encoder that produce better quality files at the end of the day. There's not a huge difference, and I think there's something about with large files over 4 gigabytes. No, that's FAT32. Never mind. It's high profile. It's the highest on the list. What do you want? And then tune, I use film. This one's up for debate. If you do a lot of things where you have still images, either still or animation is a good way to go to cut down on file sizes or optimize quality. If you have a lot of scenes that have a lot of natural film grain and you want to preserve that, you can use grain. I don't know. I use film typically because it's allocated for high motion, high bitrate scenes. You can also go without a tune. I don't know, but I think things kind of look a little bit better with film. So I picked film. Whatever. And then audio, I just have HDMI through my monitor, and I actually use a port on my monitor to route through to a mixer on my desk. Whole big thing. Basically, this will fully depend on what you have in your system. And then, I use the sharpen scaling downscale filter, but I don't really downscale, so it doesn't go into effect. But this there used to be a thing with OBS where this filter wasn't the best and that you should use bilinear all the time. But I believe that was fixed. I think I was looking on the forum for that, and I believe it was fixed. If it wasn't, oh well. And then here are my hotkeys, so I can start and stop recording, streaming, switch scenes or whatever. If I'm in a game, I'd pretty much be working blind because I only have one monitor on this computer. I used to have 2, but then whatever. Okay, so renderer, unless you are on Linux, typically go with DirectX 11. OpenGL is mainly for compatibility with Linux, and I think Mac OS. And then process priority, for the most part, just leave this at normal. Now, if this was a dedicated streaming PC like my other one is, I could probably put that up to high. But typically, you shouldn't need to adjust the process priority, as it shouldn't make too much of a difference. Let's just put it that way. Now, doing that on something like Handbrake, that might make a little bit of a difference. You might get a small bump in performance, but I don't think it's really too much to worry about here. And also, if you're gaming on the same PC, you should have more emphasis going to the game than the recording software, because real-time video encoding, especially for high bit rates or high resolutions, they have enough CPU requirements as it is. You really don't want to be increasing it unless you have a beast-ass system. And even then, you might have minimal upside to that. And NV12, I used to use i420, but I recently delved into some literature, and I determined that NV12 is a better color format to use for everything unless you're doing lossless work. Like color correction, crap down the line, lots of editing. For the most part, just pick NV12. And it's also, NV12 is designed with streaming in mind. So, yeah, it's typically the best one to use. Unless you're doing lossless stuff. But I'm not doing lossless. Now, if you're doing lossless, I would go RGB, just because it's just the raw shit. And then color space 709, it's better, but it also depends on your system. And then I use partial because I'm not doing lossless work. I don't need the full color range, and yeah, so you can save a little bit of computational crap and hard drive space by just using the partial color range. Doesn't really matter, and then the other crap is what it is. And then yeah, so that's that. Oh, also, did I go over? Yeah, so what I used to do was I wouldn't rescale, and I would use very fast and anywhere between 18 and 22, and then I would just upload that file directly. Yeah, I went over that. Okay, so that's my settings for OBS that I'm using currently. I use those on this one, and I use the same settings. Here, let me, I can also switch to it here. Ta-da! So this is my capture PC. I pretty much use the same settings there. Alright. So, hope I didn't show anything there. Alright. So now I'm going to load up Handbrake. And do I have a sample video to make? Alright, so here. I'll actually have some inception here. Alright, start recording. Beep, 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 boop. Okay. So that put a file on my desktop. I'm not going to name it. Alright, so I loaded a sample file into Handbrake. So what do I do now? Well, first thing I do is I select Web Optimized, because I was told years ago that that's a thing you should be doing. And then if there is automatic cropping detected, I go in and I put zeros on all that shit. I don't want you touching my damn video. Anamorphic, change to strict. Then I go over to filters, video, select constant frame rate, and use advanced tab instead. And if you want a higher quality looking video, I would lower this to 18. And if you want a smaller video, I would go about 22. But typically I leave it at 20. If it's an edited work or something, I might go to 18 just so I can have a little bit more of a crisp image. But otherwise, 20 is fine. Alright, audio. I go down to mix down and I go to stereo. There's less hard drive space required, and I'm just dealing with regular stereo audio anyway. I don't give a shit about surround sound. I think all that shit's crap anyway. Chapters, uncheck that box, and then make sure everything's fine here. And then I glance over the X264 encoder options, and I might make a small change of adjusting the VBV max rate to 25 and changing the buff size to 30. I might, but I haven't in the last 100 videos I made. So what I can do is I can hit start, or if I got a bunch of videos that I'm queuing up, I would have added those by selecting the folder. And then I would apply these changes, and I would be on this tab, and then I would hit add all. Well, I'll do that now. Add all. Show queue. All right, let's encode it now. What the hell? Start. And then I would let it run overnight. And then I set it so Handbrake quits automatically. And so now I should have two files. I should have one that's an MP4 and one that's a flash video. So it's here. Let's actually just go to the desktop here. Okay, so immediately what jumps out to me is look at the file sizes, right? I recorded a higher bitrate video on purpose with the intention of running it through an encoder, right? So the flash video went from 160 kilobytes to 57 kilobytes. So that's a third, a reduction of about a third of the space. And to me, I think it pretty much looks the same. I mean, yeah, there's obvious quality differences. Let's actually see what they look like. It looks pretty much like I'm looking at it right now. And then let's look at this one. Not for Christ's sake. I've recently been using Media Player Classic just to try it out. I've been using VLC for years. And to me here, that looks exactly the same as far as I'm concerned. And it's a still image, so what do you expect? There's not much to change in a still image. But there's a quality standard there, and the size of the file went down. So that's all I care about. And of course, it takes less time to upload. And I don't have to store as much. And so basically my workflow is I record on my second computer, and then it goes to a file called RAW, and then I have Handbrake look at the RAW folder. I just put everything in. Whoop, that might have been a loud noise. I put everything into Handbrake, let it run overnight, and then it saves to a folder called TBU, to be uploaded. And then I just upload that whole folder. And, another thing I just remembered with Handbrake that caused me a lot of headache early on was something you can do with output files. Of course, you can, if you're watching this video, you should know what the hell you're doing as far as where your files go. I mean, come on. But something I do in the format thing here. Default, there will be source, and then a space, and then it'll be title, I think. All right, I did that wrong. But anyway, that'll be the default. But what I do is I just delete the title, and so it keeps source. So it doesn't rename the files. It doesn't touch anything. But if you want to touch things, like maybe you save all your files in lowercase, you could you could tell the encoder to save the file as title case. What that'll do is it'll make the start of every word uppercase. And then, of course, there's other options too, like remove common punctuation, like periods, commas, crap like that. Replace underscores with a space. Some software encoders use underscores for some reason. I don't know. But yeah, that's what I do. And here's some stuff. I don't touch any of this stuff. I used to get all anal about all this crap, but I don't know. I don't care anymore. But yeah, so in a nutshell, that is my OBS settings and my Handbrake settings. If anybody has any questions, be sure to comment. And that's it. Anybody that's been on YouTube crap for long enough knows what else you can do. I'm not going to ask you to do that. It'd be nice, but you don't have to. And wow, it took me 23 minutes to explain my settings in Handbrake and OBS. I thought it was only like 5 minutes. All right, I lose track of time a lot. Peace.